All right. How's it going, everybody? I basically what I want to do is because we having considerable problems with the sound going in and out. I want to see if I could start our lecture or our lecture series on the human anatomy or really human body systems. So that's what we're gonna begin talking about today. All right. First thing we're going to talk about is the different levels of organization. Remember that the human body is organized, and if we could use kind of analogy, uh, if you want to look at cells of being the basic unit of life. So if you think of a house, the bricks to the house would be the cells, and then it kind of there's a cascade that goes upward from there. You have groups of cells that get specialized and performing the same task. They make up tissues. The same tissues make up different organs, and that's what, as you study anatomy, you can see how the different organs, the actual tissue, whatever it is, be it muscle or anything like that, actually looks differently. Like there's a course you can take in well, you have to take it in medical school. You can take it in college too, called histology. And basically, what the course is about is you learn how to look through a microscope and just be able to look at a tissue on a slide and to say, hey, that's liver tissue, or be able to tell that it's cardiac tissue that belongs to the heart or whatever. Then they have we're going to look at all the organ systems, the circulatory system, the digestive system, and all these systems, as well as incorporated with the central nervous system or the brain, all these systems lead about what's called, I think I mentioned it briefly, but homeostasis. And homeostasis is just maintaining the status quo for the body, basically. Okay. And you're going through this constantly. Your body's doing this constantly, all the time, every day. Okay, you just don't even, it's done automatically, so you don't think about it. When your body's temperature is 98.6. Okay, when you start sweating, that's means your body has exceeded 98.6, and it's trying to cool it. You're trying to cool. It's trying to cool itself off. Okay. All right. We're gonna look briefly. There's four types of cells. Specifically muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue. Muscle tissue, especially cardiac muscle, you'll be able to tell. We're going to talk about it. We mentioned the term mitochondria. Mitochondria are the energy generators for the cell. I don't know if you remember when we went over cell respiration, but a large part of cell respiration takes place in the mitochondria. Well, in cardiac muscle, you'll see lots of mitochondria because your heart muscle constantly has to have energy, and it's the only muscle that can never rest. If cardiac muscle rests, that's called a heart attack. Epithelial tissue, we're going to talk about that when we talk about the integumentary system or the skin. Okay, it's a covering for body organs and covering, like for the body. Connective tissue, that's ligaments, and you don't really know you have ligaments till you tear one or you stretch one. But those hold organs in place, and they also hold. They're involved with your joints and holding, pieces of your body and bones in place. And then also nervous tissue that receives messages, and is the nervous tissue is uh, basically in a nutshell, like one of the keys to homeostasis. Okay, it's one of the real keys to homeostasis. All right, there are 11 human body systems. You got nervous system, integumentary system, which is a bad word to use. Just say skin. Respiratory system, digestive system, excretory system. That's how wastes are eliminated. The skeletal system, muscular system, circulatory system, endocrine system, very important. reproductive system, and lymphatic system. That's your immune system, which is very prevalent today. Okay, your circulatory system. Uh, if I had my choice, I probably would have started with skin, but we're gonna look at the if you're looking at the circulatory system first, the importance behind that is the bloodstream is the information superhighway. Okay, it's the connection between every place in your body and the brain. And the brain is kind of interprets what's going on, and it will basically try to fix whatever's going on in the body. Also, the purpose of the circulatory system, it delivers oxygenated blood to the various cells. Okay, and there was a debate going on yesterday. We were talking about it in our PLC meeting. But oxygenated blood is bright red, obviously, and like on the this diagram, they have deoxygenated blood was looking blue, where it's not. I mean, it's not a perfect blue, but there is a blue, kind of a blue cast to it. Okay, and you definitely can tell a difference, or kind of a blue greenish cast to it when you can see your veins and arteries, like in your arm or whatever. It's really easy to determine like what's an artery and what's a vein. And typically, except for two, arteries always take blood away from the heart. Veins always take uh, blood to the heart. But there's an artery that takes blood to the heart, and there's a vein that takes blood away from the heart. So we'll get into that later. The pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. Okay. The major organs in on their function. Obviously, the major organ in the heart is major organ in the circulatory system is the heart. And this is the one muscle in your body. The reason we learn about muscles is that the one muscle in your body that can never rest is, of course, your heart. Now, there's certain circumstances where your heart does rest when you go to outer space, because your heart is not beating against gravity. It does in fact rest while you're in zero gravity or zero G. And then I was fortunate enough to take my class. I taught an anatomy class at the school I taught at in Chicago. I was able to take my whole class to go see open heart surgery. And the wild part about open heart surgery is like the heart is not beating the whole time, obviously, when they're working on it. So technically, I guess during the surgery, the heart would be resting because it's definitely not beating. Okay, and this just not to belabor the point on the circulatory system, the big deal is gas exchange, and that's one of the reasons. And we might cover it a little bit more in depth. But one of the reasons we kind of want you guys to know about, understand about atoms and electrons and stuff like that is because the gas exchange in the lungs actually, the O2 or oxygen that you breathe in dissolves through the capillaries, which are wrapped around these little sacs in your lungs called alveoli. And the red blood cells that are in your capillaries pick up the oxygen, one oxygen atom at a time. Okay, one oxygen atom at a time. Also, the CO2 that's in the deoxygenated blood dissolves out of the bloodstream and into the small alveolar sacs in your lungs, and then you breathe that out, all in the time when it takes to go. That's what's happening. Okay, and and then the blood is filtered, and from that point, and toxins and stuff like that are removed from the blood. But like I said, the gas exchange is one atom at a time. And so why is that important? Because the way that the oxygen atom is picked up is in your bloodstream. You got something called hemoglobin, and hemoglobin, the heme group actually has iron in it, and it's the heme group that actually picks up the oxygen atom when you breathe in. Now, why is that important? Because if you hear somebody saying that they're anemic, means they're low on iron. You need that iron for the heme group on the hemoglobin molecule to make sure you pick up enough oxygen. And that's one of the problems that people who are anemic, who don't have enough iron, they have a problem picking up oxygen. All right. Next, we're going to look at the nervous system. Purpose of the nervous system is to basically interpret everything that's going on in the body, and externally and internally, and kind of coordinate homeostasis doing that, basically. Okay. And I tell all my classes this, but it's true. I mean, if you want to look at it, your eyes do not see and your ears do not hear. I'm going to say it again. Your eyes do not see and your ears do not hear. And what I mean by that is that your eyes are sensors and your ears are sensors, and the brain is what interprets what you hear and see. So, the eyes pick up certain visual information, but it's your brain that says, hey, that's a bird, or hey, that's somebody I know. Or when your ears pick up information, you can say, hey, that's Mozart, or hey, that's Tupac. Okay, because your brain interprets it what it is. All right. Like I said, the brain is the control center, but where the brain gets most of its information is from the bloodstream. Okay, it's from the bloodstream. Now, um, not to be too specific about the brain, but I think it's important that you understand the consistency of the brain. If you've ever seen, uh, if you've ever seen, um, what do you call it, applesauce? Okay, your actual brain looks and is the same consistency of applesauce. The only thing that makes it look solid are the meninges, thick membranes around the outside. Okay, that basically hold it together. And most of the time, if you see a real human brain, most of the time it's frozen. Okay, to make sure that it's solid. But the brain is basically, like I said, it's the consistency of applesauce. Okay, and it actually looks almost the same color of applesauce. Inside the what I call your brain, the applesauce, there's thousands of blood vessels, because your brain has to have nourishment and it has to have oxygen and stuff like that. So, but think about something that has that consistency of applesauce and it has a membrane around it. So what has happened recently is that, like there are veterans or people who've been in the major conflicts we've had in Iraq that will have get traumatic brain injury. And what that is that if you picture if you had a jug of applesauce and you shook it up, okay, and then it stops shaking. So what happens is, if your brain gets jostled, if you get shaken to the point where your brain gets shaken around like that, okay, it really messes things up. And then the sad part about it, people with traumatic brain injuries, they may look like nothing's wrong with them, but they have all kind of things. And like when somebody gets a concussion or gets knocked out, that's when like your brain basically sloshes and hits the side of your skull. Okay, and normally that will take you out. So, but that's the consistency of the brain. The spinal cord sends instructions from the brain to the rest of the body. Also, the brain stem, or what they say is the medulla oblongata, the pons and the medulla. The brain stem is what's known as the cardiac center, and what that means uh, is that the brain stem, which is the beginning of the spinal cord, is what um, controls involuntary muscular function and involuntary functions in the body. Okay, so it controls your breathing, your digestion, smooth muscle movement, and all that kind of stuff. So it's very important in situations where, like, if people because of an accident or something like that, lose a lot of their brain function in their cerebral cortex. If as long as their brain stem is intact, a lot of times, their body will continue to breathe and stuff like that. Okay, part of the hallmark of the feedback loop, which we're going to get into a little bit later, deals with your nerves. Okay, your nerves are actually what they conduct impulses to the muscles. So your brain will send a message, and once that nerve impulse gets up to a point, then the muscles will be triggered to fire by things we don't get into muscle contraction, but there are things called neurotransmitters that there's a small gap between the nerves, okay, like your nerve endings and the endings of your muscles fibers, okay, and that little gap is called a neuromuscular junction. And what will end up happening is that once the nerve impulse comes down, it will release a neurotransmitter, specifically called acetylcholine. It releases that neurotransmitter that goes across the nerve to muscle junction or the neuromuscular junction and causes the contraction of a muscle fire. And this is happening, as this is happening if you want to raise your arm or whatever. That's happening in millions of times. Okay, in terms of nerve cells, there are three types of nerve cells. There's sensory, and these are ones that are embedded in the skin and stuff like that, that pick up pressure, that pick up heat and cold and stuff like that. They're motor. The motor neurons, the second type, is go from the brain or the spinal to the other organs, okay? And they're interneurons, which connects the sensory and motor neurons, okay? And all of these are used in the space, and we're going to talk about the most basic feedback loop is like, hey, I put my hand on a hot stove, okay? And so you sensory neurons pick up, uh, that, hey, this is too hot. It gets back to the brain. The brain says it's too hot. The brain will send an impulse down and then your muscles fire and you pull your hand off. Okay, and that will take that particular interlude takes a millisecond. Okay, and uh, those who those of you who are athletes that play like soccer, and most athletes, I mean, are really your feedback mechanisms and your sensory neurons are really like hypersensitized for you to be able to make split second moves, especially doing something like a corner kick and you jump up and head the ball in. That takes tremendous not only concentration, but it takes the milliseconds of timing and movements and stuff like that to make that happen. Okay, the central nervous system. In the central nervous system, we have the brain. Okay, the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brain stem. Okay, we're not gonna be total sticklers for that, but just know that the cerebrum is the big part that looks like a cauliflower. The cerebellum looks like a let me see if they get that picture. Cerebellum looks like a almost like a tennis ball at the back, and the brain stem is basically a stem that's underneath like the bottom of the brain. Okay, next we're gonna look at the respiratory system. The respiratory system, the purpose of the respiratory system is to provide the body with fresh supply of oxygen and oxygenated blood, and for cellular respiration and to remove the waste product, which is carbon dioxide. Okay, um, it has several parts. Most of you know what the nose is. I hope you know where your nose is. And the pharynx serves as the passageway for both air and food to the at the back of the throat. The larynx is your voice box and vocal cords, and which is very interesting because they've had singers. I didn't know it was possible to permanently wear your vocal cords out, but they've had. If you've ever heard the group Journey, the lead singer Steve Perry has apparently he did something to his vocal cords and he can't sing anymore. So he's still alive, but he can't sing. And so they've had to get a new guy to stand in for him with the group, and it's just not the same. Your trachea, you can actually feel your trachea right here, this little notch, like basically where your neck meets your shoulders, a little notch right there. If you press in, not too hard, of course, you can feel the ridges on your trachea. That's your windpipe. Okay, and it's rigid, so it'll stay open so you can breathe. The epiglottis, epiglottis is a little flap, and then normally you don't notice it, but when you swallow, you kind of feel it covering your windpipe. Now, choking occurs whenever you get food kind of under the upper epiglottis, which is a bad thing. Then you'll choke, and then the only way to really there's the Heimlich maneuver is the only way to really stop somebody from choking. The trachea branches out into two large passageways that lead from the trachea to your lungs, and then it continues to branch out. You have bronchi, bronchioles, and eventually you have the little sacs I was talking about called the alveoli. Little things that look like grapes, and your capillaries are actually wrapped around them, and that's where gas exchange occurs. Okay, gas exchange occurs, and then, like I said, it's at the individual oxygen atom level. That's where gas exchange occurs from when you breathe in from the lungs into the the bloodstream by way of the individual red blood cells actually pick up the oxygen atoms, and then CO2 is diffused from the blood into the alveoli and then out through the lungs, all in the space that it takes for you to go. One of the interesting things, and we're actually going to get into the mechanics of breathing a little bit so you'll understand, because just breathing in and out is way more complex than you might think. But the big player, and right up under your lungs, you can feel it right here, is a muscle that's called the diaphragm. And based on the way that the diaphragm moving up or down, that and your ribs allow your chest cavity to expand or contract. And based on that, that's basically what causes there to be a pressure differential within your lungs to cause you to breathe in or out. And I'm actually gonna go over that with you, because it's just good for just for general principle, what the mechanics of breathing are. Okay. Now, and just briefly, I think it's pretty obvious that there's certain organ systems that interact with one another. The respiratory system interacts with the circulatory system. How, may you ask? The respiratory system actually provides the oxygen to oxygenate the blood for the circulatory system. Okay. And it does it in a good way, or it can do it in a bad. People don't realize when they smoke, okay, you breathe, they're inhaling all that tar and stuff like that. It does go into the bloodstream, and it does more than that. It does affect your heart. Okay, and it definitely affects your nervous system. And the reason people get hooked on smoking is because in your nerve endings you have what are called nicotinic receptors. You already have receptor sites for nicotine in your blood, in your nerve endings. That's why it makes it so addictive. Okay, pretty much I think uh, that's where we're gonna stop right now. And I'm gonna have like a short assignment for you to do, but we're gonna stop there and we'll continue our lecture next time. I just wanted to be able to go through a couple of the body systems with you, And the reason I did this video is because, you know, we have problems with the sound going in and out. But thank you for being your attention.